introduce Mike Runtz. Now, Mike Runtz is very well known in the province. Now, I've known Mike for a long time. A couple of years ago, I ran into him at the Algonquin Naturalist Reunion. We both were naturalists there back in the 70s. And so I asked if he would come to do a talk for us. And I think he'd had a few beers and sure, I'll come over, no problem. I'd do that for you, James. But of course, he lives way up in Arnprior, which is a long ways away. And send him some emails, no response. Bed. Now our meetings were online. And so I got back to Mike and I said, Mike, you don't have to come to Durham. So he agreed to come to us today. So I'll just give you a little bit of, for those of you that maybe don't know of Mike's background, Mike, he has been an excellent field naturalist in the province for a long time. His association with Algonquin Park goes back 50 years. He's been in the most remote parts of the park, and when you see his photographs, you'll be totally in awe, as I am. He's hosted an international television series called Wild by Nature, and he's authored and illustrated the photographs in 14 natural history books, including Algonquin Wild. Mike's written more than 1,000 natural history articles for newspapers and magazines, and he's also a natural history and ornithology prof at Carleton University. Natural history just goes through and through this man, and I really appreciate Mike, and also Mike, he's had a pretty bad accident lately. I don't know when he's going to be able to pick up his paddle and canoe again. And so I first was afraid we might not even get him tonight, but you can see he's in a sling and he's still willing to give us that presentation. So thank you, Mike. The floor is yours.
Just before
My pleasure, James.
Sorry, Mike, just before you present, just to make the presentation run a little bit more smoothly in terms of bandwidth and also so that there's no background noise when Mike is presenting. If everybody could turn their mics off and also their videos off. So just in the bottom corner of the screen there where there's a little mic, if you could mute it, and a little picture of a camera, if you could click that so it turns your video off. That would be awesome. Sorry to interrupt there, Mike. Now the floor is yours.
That's okay. Just don't mute this mic. I got to speak. Anyway, it's a real pleasure to be here. And James, I would be there if you wanted me in person. But this makes it much easier, doesn't it, right now? Okay, well, I'll start with my presentation. I guess I start by screen sharing here, and hopefully this will be a smooth transition. And hopefully, Carrie, you can tell me if this is all thus far.
Okay, I can see that it says you've started screen sharing. Yep, I can see your presentation there.
Okay, good. Well, as James said, my talk is called Algonquin Wild, and it is based pretty well on this fairly recent book, Algonquin Wild, that I did a few years ago. And yes, as James said, my association to the park goes back. It's actually more than 60 years now. And I'm not sure if I'm feeding the deer or my dad is feeding me to the deer. I went there with my family to see the white-tailed deer that were so commonly encountered along the Highway 60 corridor. And I was very lucky in getting a job there in the early 70s, as James also did, and many of us were so privileged to work in Algonquin Park. Here we are, and I think it's 72, and that's me in the bow. That's Dr. Bill Crins in the middle. He always looked so youthful, didn't he? And Ron Tozer, the famous Ron Tozer, who wrote The Birds of Algonquin, and many of you have met him on field trips with OFO and so on. Phenomenal birder, and what a crew, eh? Just amazing. These two fellows with me, wow. And I continue to go back to the park at every opportunity. And I've got to say, I'm nowhere happier than in Algonquin, immersed in the tonic of this great park. And so let's meet Algonquin Park. Well, first off, for a naturalist, it's really a dream come true. With more than 1,000 species of flora and, really diverse flora. 880 species of birds known to the park, about half those nest every year. And they include some of the iconic symbols of the wild, like common loons. And certainly in terms of mammals, there's 50 odd species of mammals in the park. And one in particular, the eastern wolf, is one of the rarer ones to be encountered. And it's the best spot in the world, actually, for encountering eastern wolves. But there are many others, and many of these too are symbols of the wild, like our mighty moose. And if you like insects, there's over 100 species of, or 90 species of butterflies known, but thousands of other species as well. So Algonquin Park really is a naturalist dream come true. And the reason for this incredible biodiversity lies in part with the park's geological history. Algonquin lies atop a former mountain range that over 2 billion years has worn down to its present elevations, which are amongst the highest in Ontario, believe it or not. The western side has the highest hills, 600 meters or more in elevation. And when the glaciers melted back over these hills, it dropped behind a huge load of glacial till, which is particles of various sizes, including tiny ones like silt. And these things help trap moisture. And so those western hills have this blanket, courtesy of the glaciers, that supports rich hardwood forests. And so the western part of Algonquin is cloaked with these beautiful hardwood forests with sugar maples dominant, but yellow birch, American beech mixed in, black cherry, and that sort of thing. And it's these forests that blaze color in the autumn that's unrivaled. And that brings to Algonquin hundreds of thousands of tourists just to see the spectacular show in the fall. In the western side, you have typical hardwood forest flowers, although they're a bit different than down in your area because white trilliums are really rare. Red trilliums, which smell pretty terrible to attract their pollinators, which are both flesh flies and carrion flies, are the dominant trillium. But you also find a lot of the beautiful painted trillium too, especially if there's conifers mixed in, maybe near eastern hemlocks, for example. In the canopy above, scarlet tanagers are common. In the understory below, black-throated blue warblers are quite common. So many of the birds you have down there as well. And one of the dominant squirrels of that forest type is the eastern chipmunk. The eastern side of Algonquin is really different. First off, it's lower in elevation by about 200 meters, so quite a bit lower and warmer as well. The glaciers didn't leave behind really till there, but a glacial spillway from the glacial Lake Algonquin farther north roared through for about 100 years or so and left behind huge beds of sand. Of course, sand drains very readily, and having less precipitation over here because the western hills act like, provide almost a rain shadow effect as winds come off Georgian Bay laden with moisture. And so it's a much drier habitat over here. And that's really good for, not for hardwood forests so much, but for pine forests. And over here, white pine, red pine, and in places jack pine are dominant. And there you find the coniferous forest flowers. The pink lady slipper is abundant. And right now is a great show of Trilling arbutus, one of the best smelling flowers in the world. The only problem is for Trilling arbutus, if you want to see it, you have to get down low because often those flowers are hidden under the leaves. And that made me think the other day when I was photographing this species that, if someone goes in the forest and comes out with clean knees, they really haven't seen the forest, have they? You got to get down on your hands and knees to see some of the more interesting inhabitants. Some of the other flowers are more obvious, so like Polygula, for example. And one of my favorites, Pipsissewa. You don't see this view very often. The flower points down. You got to get down and look up at it. And what a gorgeous flower with really strange fused, like those are flowers that are buzz pollinated. Those flowers have bumblebees attached to these things and shake them at a certain frequency with their wings to take the pollen out. So far, studies have shown this is not buzz pollinated, but it certainly has those features. In the pine forest, you've got not so many scarlet tanagers, but certainly have pine warblers abundantly. And because of the pine cones bearing the seeds that red crossbills favor, we have nesting red crossbills over here, which have very large bills, for extracting those seeds by prying apart the scales of the cones with those beautiful curved tips. And with a lot of pine cones around, you have a lot of red squirrels. They are much more common than most squirrel types in the park. And although it's lower in elevation, there is some spectacular geology, including the Barren Canyon on the Barren River. If you haven't been there, there's a walking trail on top. And the beauty of it is there's no guardrails like many of the trails have in other parks. You can enjoy the wild beauty at your own risk. And but to see the canyon best is to paddle through it. And there you go back in time, thousands of years. You see these beautiful Precambrian rocks. But these are a little bit different than most rocks in Algonquin because of what you find growing there. Lime does percolate through the crevices, and therefore you find some of the plants and other organisms that like calcium, like this beautiful sunburst lichen that covers them often in great quantity. It's rich in ferns, many ferns that people just love to see, like fragile fern, fragrant, and some pretty rare ferns, especially for the Algonquin dome itself, like purple stem cliffbrake is found there. So a really wonderful spot. And plants you love so much back at home, which are rare in Algonquin, also are found here, including poison ivy, one of the few spots you'll find it in the park. What I love about the canyon is you go back in time and see birds nesting as they did before we came along. On these cliffs, you find nesting birds under the overhangs. And to see all the moss on that nest, that reveals that nest to be an eastern phoebe nest with the young just about to fledge. Peregrine falcons have now nested there for a few years. And I was very lucky 2 years ago by canoe to discover the ledge they're nesting on. And from the top of the canyon, the next day, I saw food transfer. The males go off hunting, they come back, they call the females on the nest, she leaves the nest, she flies under the males, and the males drop their goodies to them, allowing the female to return to the nest with food. In this case, though, one exciting thing for me, what he was dropping was an eastern chipmunk. And peregrine falcons are best known for eating other birds. And there's a transfer complete, and the male goes off to resume his hunting. The lower elevations of the park, especially on the waterways, harbor the northern boreal forests that give Algonquin a very special feel. And these are the forests of black spruce and balsam fir and tamarack. And these, of course, have their own inhabitants and their own beauty. You know, I can see Northern River here, that's McManus Bog, but whenever I go to McManus Bog, I feel Thompson's Northern River. What a painting that is. Really captured the essence of that part of Algonquin Park. In these more northern forests, you find northern inhabitants like American marten, spruce grouse, which does not occur much farther south in Ontario, blackback woodpeckers, commonly encountered, and of course, the gray jay. Oh, I think I made a little slip there, James. Gray jay. It's now called Canada jay, of course, because this bird is so damn patriotic. Isn't that true? No, its name is changed for good reason. Dan Strickland lobbied and got it changed because historically it was called the Canada jay. Parasaurus canadensis is a scientific name. In this habitat too, you used to find boreal chickadees, but like the Canada jay, they're on the decline, and no one knows why boreal chickadees are declining. It's speculated Canada jay's food storage in winter decaying, and we'll talk about that later on. But for boreal chickadees, why are they declining? Nobody knows, but they're getting really, really rare now in the park. There are other northern animals too that do not occur farther south. McCown's arctics, which fly every 2 years only, are found in the jack pine flats in the east. And common branded skipper, a very tiny butterfly that also doesn't occur farther south in Ontario. So Algonquin has these great treasures, and that's largely due to being on that elevated dome among the highest elevations in Ontario. Therefore, you have more dramatic seasonal changes and cooler temperatures overall. That dome is also responsible for a lot of waterways starting off. And the remarkable thing is these waterways start as streams and so on, become rivers, which flow in all directions. Can you imagine one park, rivers flowing north, Amadou Defoe, rivers flowing east, the Petawawa, the Bon Cher flowing southeast, Madawaska, and so on and so on. Every direction has rivers flowing in. It's very unusual indeed. So water is a major theme in Algonquin Park, everything from rushing streams to larger collections forming rivers. Here's the Petawawa at Poplar Rapids. Here's the mighty York River, High Falls, just spectacular. The mighty High Falls of the Bon Cher River. So many waterfalls are called High Falls, ridiculous. Well, of imagination. Besides the rushing, flowing waters, you've got lot more still waters, beautiful ponds, some formed by beavers, some just formed from glacial melt. More than 1,000 lakes that have been named. And lakes are fantastic habitats, aren't they? Their demeanor changes. They can be calm and beautiful and peaceful, or a little bit wild, or at times even a bit scary, especially if you're canoeing across a big lake, which I was doing here. Of course, lakes are a habitat. You have the typical inhabitants like common loons, whose wild cries are heard at night, making camping there an incredible experience. Common mergansers, a common fish-eating duck, are also abundant there. The males, as some reported in the sightings, are never found in the park in summer. After mating, they wander north. They form huge rafts of males up at James Bay, especially Hudson Bay. And there they tell stories, go fishing all the time, have a wonderful time, escaping all the family duties. Other fish eaters include river otters, which are quite common all through Algonquin. What I really find intriguing about Algonquin, when you go to any one spot and go there repeatedly through the seasons, you see dramatic changes. You go to a beaver pond in spring, you'll see midge swarms. You go there in late summer, you'll see mists rising from the waters. And if you go there in winter, of course, you see the snows. You know, midges and mist and snow are just seasonal accessories for the forest, aren't they? Same way as leaves are a seasonal accessory. And for a beautiful change all the way through the fall into winter. And now I'll start a little overview of some of the highlights of Algonquin's natural history based on the seasons. We'll start with spring. Now, normally you think of spring as like March 21st and then forward from there. But in reality, in Algonquin Park, if you base it on nesting birds, spring starts in late February. That's when Canada jays are actually on their eggs in many cases. And they line the inside of their nest with soft, fluffy material. This one was gathering cattail down to line its nest with. And they incubate the eggs through some pretty tough conditions, because starting in late February, there are many days where it's well below zero and heavy snows can still continue to fall. To me, one of the major highlights of winter as it progresses is on those warm days. You look at the snow, tiny black specks moving around. These are amazing little animals called snow fleas, which are not fleas. They're a group called springtails, and they're only a few millimeters long. But are they amazing? They leap 100 times their body length in a split second and they're gone. Try to photograph one. One of my greatest accomplishments, I think, was getting a picture of a springtail just about to leap. If you look under here, see a little forked structure just hitting the snow crystal. This guy was gone like in a millisecond later. And just as that touched the snow crystal, out popped from the back end a three-pronged structure, like little balloon fingers popping out. And it took me a while to figure out what these are, but finally the world expert in Antwerp inform me these were, they believe, landing gear. They also have a spot up here on the underside that inflates and is sticky. And these probably do the same thing, where as the guy catapults in the air and hits another snow crystal, it doesn't bounce off. It sticks right there, and then it can retract the gear and carry on from there. Excuse the background sound here. I'm going to ignore that. Among the other snow walkers, you'll find larger ones. The giants are snow flies. These are 8 millimeter, and coyote is the Latin name for them, but they are incredible, and they're wingless, and they walk on the snow. They come from down below, and some of them are in mouse burrows and spots like that, and no one knows why for sure they're on top of the snow, but for some, like the snow fleas, maybe they're getting food, or maybe they're looking for mates. The same thing goes for these beautiful, incredible insects. These are snow scorpion flies, and they look so bizarre. That's a female, but they're not looking for food on top of the snow. They feed on mosses. So normally they're in moss down below, but they come above on warm days again, like snow fleas and snow flies do, and roam around. The males have a beautiful appearance. They have a strange pair of appendages here for holding females on their back while they mate with them. Also later on, as you get in warmer days, start seeing butterflies too. These are ones that spend the winter in the adult stage, hidden away in crevices, surviving sub-zero temperatures, and then flying in the early parts of spring. That's a Compton's tortoiseshell, one of the more common species. As winter progresses, you get these warm days where lake ice begins to decay, and you have these beautiful layers of mist that hang over them at dawn. As the waters open up, some mammals get more active. Otters start traveling around more widely, looking for mates. Here's an otter trail here. The matings of otters is interesting. Like many mammals, scents are used, special perfumes called pheromones. The female does a little dance like this, that I've observed at least, before depositing her pheromones out here with her urine. And then she rolls in them, getting herself quite attractive for males that sniff her out. Just really remarkable what happens at the top of the ice. As the ice begins to recede from lake edges and beaver ponds especially, beavers get really active. They're enjoying the fresh air after spending the winter inside their lodge and then going under the ice to get food. They don't hibernate, but they are not seen above the snow very often in wintertime, but they're very apparent as the ice begins to melt. And by the way, I've noticed something unrecorded in beaver behavior, and that's only seen the last 2 years. Beavers, when they first emerge, put on masks. Isn't that incredible? Oh, well, we try. And you get snow still, as I mentioned, in late winter when Canada jays are nesting and moose are walking around. This nesting great horned owl was last year using an old great blue heron nest. And of course, snows fall even through April. But she survived and her chicks survived quite nicely. As the ice comes off the flowing waters, ducks return. Hooded mergansers are common park nesters, but again, the males are not really found around in summer, the females are. Other ducks are found in summer as well. Ringneck ducks return and nest. Others just pass through. And right now, buffleheads, here's a female, just passing through on the way farther north into the boreal forest. Suckers start spawning in late spring, white suckers. As they're going to their spawning areas, the flowers are popping up on the hardwood forest floor. At this time of year, the sun is pouring through. There are no leaves to intercept it, and the floors become carpeted in flowers like trout lily. And by the way, trout lily has two forms. One form has red stamens and red pollen, and the other form has yellow stamens and yellow pollen. And there's been no advantage found in either coloration. And so it's a rather intriguing aspect of this very common wildflower. Among the spring ephemerals, you'll find plenty of Dutchman's breeches. Squirrel corn is pretty rare though. Spring beauties are abundant with these northern white violets behind, looking on in admiration, I think. But again, Snows can occur even into May. And last year, this is from last year, a heavy snowfall in May, and that did in most of the flowering parts of many flowers, including trout lily. But they've got a backup plan. Many of the spring flowers have another flower hidden down in the leaves that self-pollinates, or in this case, they can reproduce through their rootstock-like structures, so they can reproduce vegetatively. By the time the leaves come out on the trees in full force, the spring flowers are pretty well finished, and out come the black flies, which will be out in a couple of weeks from now. You know, for a tiny animal, they really are famous, aren't they? They're just world famous. Well, at least in northern areas, they're famous. And for those who visit those northern areas. But, you know, amazing slicing mandibles, they put anticoagulants in your blood, and they sure do a number. Now, many of you use repellents or wear gear, I guess, to keep them off you. I don't. I don't know if it ever shows, though, if you ever see me in black fly season. But to me, it's the price of admission, you know, just to get out there. With the insects, of course, return the birds, and Algonquin is famous for its wood warblers. 20 species nest in the park, remarkable diversity, including American redstarts, the chestnut-sided warblers, black-throated green, Blackburnian, and so on. Great diversity. Even some of the northern ones that specialize in the boreal forest on things like spruce budworm are there in small numbers, like Cape May warbler, for example. As the waters warm up and turtles come out, they bask on logs, get warmed up, get rid of ectoparasites from their bodies, at least they try to. And the females then, when it's warm enough, when they're warm enough, leave the water to lay their eggs on land. And so by the end of May, early June, turtles go through this exodus and start laying their eggs. They excavate them. Here you can see a leech that was down in the lake, now trying to find more moist places without success. And the eggs are laid hidden, and the females leave back to the water again. Not many nests all make it, because they have many eyes that look for nests, everything from skunks, which are rare in the park, to raccoons and red foxes especially. And I was very lucky a few years ago to come across red fox at daybreak that was searching for a turtle nest and had found one, digging into the dirt behind the back. And it would pull the eggs out one at a time. It would slice them open with the canines and then lick out. Oops, I think I've lost my connection here.
We can still hear you,
Is
Mike.
everything good still?
Yeah, we can still hear you,
Okay,
Mike.
you still see me too?
Yeah, I can
Good.
see
I had a
you.
little warning pop. We've had a thunderstorm here, so I was just hoping I wasn't losing connection. Good. Okay, I'll carry on. The fox sliced open the eggs and then licked out the contents one by one. That brings us to summer. Turtles are done nesting by then, and you can see that the mallard here has her young out. These are eating all sorts of things on the beaver dam with the moose behind. Beavers have a great time in summer. They go on land now, bring in fresh food. Here's Virgin's bower being devoured by this beaver. I love beaver tail slaps. I spent a lot of time trying to photograph beaver tail slaps. And, you know, for the tail itself is famous, especially on the Rideau Canal in Ottawa, but those are different beaver tails. The tail slaps are amazing because they're powered by the base of the tail. When you see a beaver scaly tail, you're seeing only 2/3 of the tail. The basal third is here. It's all muscle and covered in hair, and that powers that tail slap. And beaver tail slaps, to me, everyone is different, just like snowflakes. And to me, these are beaver art, I call them. So I had to show you a few of my more memorable beaver tail slaps I've witnessed. And then the grand finale, of course. Yeah, okay. Summer flowers are abundant in the park, but not in the forest. These are out in open areas like roadside edges and where burns have gone through, or old mill sites, that sort of thing. Spreading dogbane is abundant, and boy, is it a magnet for insects, including butterflies of various types, silver-bordered fritillary here, or the day-flying hummingbird sphinx moths, and there are several species in the park. This is one of the common ones, hummingbird sphinx moth, or clearwing, they're also called. And then we have a newly described species, they'll split off another one. There was one called the snowberry clearwing that's been divided into 2 species a few years ago, and this is the more northern one. It hasn't got a common name as far as I know. It's Hemaris aethra, and maybe we should call it the bush honeysuckle clearwing, because the only known food plant for it, I think is 4 larvae found on food plants, have all been this northern bush honeysuckle. But these are going to the flowers. Milkweed is common in open areas, and it's also a magnet for insects and even for hummingbirds sometimes. But of course, there's other flowers they prefer, we'll see later on. The waterways come alive too with wildflowers. Wild iris blankets the shores of many ponds and slow-moving rivers and lakes. And they've got a great pollination story where bees have to crawl in under this petal and to get their reward, and in the process pollen travels with them. The slow-moving waters become alive with water lilies. White water lilies are abundant, and they're an amazing flower because when they first open, they're functionally female that attract lots of activity from flies and even beetles. They crawl down to a nice sweet reward, bit of a liquid down below. They close on the first day, open the next day, and no longer are they functionally female, they're functionally males, and the pollen is available on the stamens. So remarkable sex change in the white water lily. The yellow pond lily also goes through a sex change as well. And both species are food for a number of organisms, many small, but the beaver loves them as well. It especially loves the yellow pond lily, and it devours the leaves, stems, flowers, and underwater rhizomes. If you paddle through an area and see the stems of yellow pond lily with no flower on, that's a sign that a beaver has been there. The tiniest flower that I think is really beautiful is the water shield flower. And it's unusual that it's wind pollinated, while most of the aquatic plants are insect pollinated. Water shield can form these dense mats where frogs like mink frogs can hide so readily. Again, small animals love devouring these leaves, and water lily leaf beetles, both the larvae and the adults here, can chew these patterns through. And sometimes these patterns make amazing stories out of them. For example, I did spend a lot of time gazing at these leaves from a canoe, and suddenly realized I was looking at fairy tales. Do you see Cinderella here? See her happy face, her little eyes and smile, her little foot, and her little slipper waiting here for her. And she hasn't done much work, a little large bottom here, but I'm sure she'll wear that off. By the way, moose love devouring water shield and other aquatic plants too, because the leaves of the aquatic plants have many more times sodium in them than the leaves on shore do on terrestrial plants. And so moose get the majority of their sodium by feeding on water plants. And they store that water in the first part of their stomach called the rumen. When moose go under the water, by the way, to get their water plants, you'll see swarms of flies leave their body and they land again quickly. These are moose flies. And moose flies, both males and females, draw blood from the moose. And they only feed on moose. They're tied to moose. And they lay their eggs in moose droppings. So the whole life cycle of moose flies depends upon moose. If moose ever go extinct, then these flies will also go that way. They don't bite humans, which is a good thing, but we have our own problems, don't we? And in Algonquin Park, biting flies are famous, not just black flies, but mosquitoes, especially after a wet season, become very abundant. There's lots of deer flies later in summer in those warm, sunny days, and horse flies too. By the way, that's my own hand. I had a little hobby of photographing biting insects on me. And this year, maybe, well, I guess not. I can't use my hand on my camera, unfortunately, but I wanted to photograph no-see-ums with a special lens, these tiny little biting midges or punkies. But look at the eyes on a horsefly. Reminds me of that singer there, Bono from U2. Incredible eyes. And then we have stable flies, which can be very common. And just 2 years ago in Algonquin, I was forced off a lake, first time in my life, by biting flies, and they're stable flies. They were abundant and they were nasty. But they have their own problems, don't they? Algonquin is famous for its odonates. I think it's 110 odd species known now from the park of dragonflies and damselflies. This one's called a stream bluette, and it's photographed from above, hence the shadow down below here. But of course, damselflies eat small insects, while dragonflies eat larger ones. And there are so many incredible dragonflies in the park. In fact, one of the best dragonfly books for identification is the Dragonflies and Damselflies of Algonquin Park. Chalk-fronted corporal, which I like calling chalk-fronted skimmer, because they're a skimmer, is one of the most common ones. You find in different habitats, different dragonflies, by fast-flowing streams or small rivers with riffles. You find the beautiful rusty snaketail. And you find some of the bigger dragonflies there as well, including the dragon hunter, named for eating other dragonflies. I just love this guy. Look at the size of the thorax, big and muscular and strong legs for grabbing other dragonflies. Many of these dragonflies are incredibly beautiful, and they have interesting life histories as well. This is one of the smaller ones, the calico pennant. And when they lay their eggs, they do it often in shallow lakes. They stay coupled together. Dragonflies, when they mate, form a wheel position, often separating after mating, and females go their way. But in this is stay coupled. And here's a real challenge for any photographer out there. Try photographing calico pennants laying their eggs like this. And it took me many, many hours and very patient Britta in the canoe to finally capture what is, I think, is an interesting photograph showing the female hitting the water as she drops her egg. And it's high speed when they do this. It's quite a feat. Many dragonflies don't make it to fruition because of predators. When dragonflies and even damselflies first leave the water stage, they spend about a year as a nymph. Then they climb out when the water temperature is correct, and they climb up and their skin splits. Here's the nymph case here. Out comes a new dragonfly or damselfly, very soft and in a tendril stage and helpless. And that's when grackles and red-winged blackbirds get them. They comb the edge of waterways and lakes. You watch them, especially when they have young, and they get so many, they get beakfuls of these emerging dragonflies and then go back to the nest. And so when I did Algonquin Wild, I have many targets, and one was to get a dragonfly being pursued by a grackle. And this is about the closest I came to what I wanted. And I think it's neat showing the intent on the grackle and the helpless dragonfly sitting here. I think one of the highlights of summer is going to a sapsucker tree. Yellow-bellied sapsuckers are common in Algonquin Park, and they have favorite trees they tap for the sap, hence the name sapsucker. And if you find a whale tree, these are all whales. And by the way, they make different whales in spring and later summer. They tap into the xylem tissues in spring. They're bringing up sugar from down below. And in summer, into the phloem tissues, bringing sugars down from the leaves. Like, these are remarkable birds. And they drill these holes, keep them open, and get their sap for them. But these are cafes for nature. These are nature's cafes. If you spend a day at a sapsucker tree, you see so many amazing organisms coming. This one tree, I spent many, many hours there, enjoyable hours, watching hummingbirds. Here's a nested sphinx moth, same tree. Lots of vespids, yellow jackets and bald-faced hornets, and lots of flies. Butterflies came. And then this highlight to me came this European horned Vespa crabrow, first record for the park. These came into Ontario, I think in the 70s, around the St. Lawrence area, around Kingston, and have slowly spread north. And this is the first record for Algonquin, and perhaps the most northern record for the species at the time coming in. It chased away, by the way, the hummingbirds. And this mourning cloak, by opening and closing the wings, scared away the Vespa crabrow, the European hornet. So what was it seeing? Are there hidden patterns here with ultraviolet, or something here terrified this large insect that scared away a hummingbird? I found that intriguing. Mammals came as well. Red squirrels have a sweet tongue, as do eastern chipmunks. And then eventually the baby sapsuckers would come out to enjoy the feast as well. Parents would bring back the sugar water to them, but when they could fledge, they came here. So sapsuckers have a sweet tooth for sap, but Some animals have a sweet tooth for sapsuckers. Their main predator in Algonquin Park were black bears, which will climb a tree and bite below the nest hole and eat the baby sapsuckers. Doug Tozer, Ron's son, did an incredible PhD study on these birds and discovered this. And he found even more intriguing is, if sapsuckers build their nest in a poplar tree, aided by a special bracket fungus that weakened the inside, they had a better survival rate than sapsuckers building nests in older maples or beech trees in the hardwood forest. It turns out that the outer wood of poplars remains strong while the inside becomes a bit soft, while on beech and maples, the outer wood becomes soft as well, and bears can bite through there more readily. Remarkable discovery made by Doug Tozer. I love going through a forest and looking at holes, and believe it or not, I was hired for 3 days to walk into Algonquin's hardwood forest and bang on trees with sticks. That was my job, paid by, I think it was BBC film crew, looking for nesting hooded mergansers. Didn't find any, but had a wonderful time. And in some of the holes, out would pop a pileated woodpecker, the maker. And by the way, pileated woodpecker holes are not round. They're this configuration. And that's easily identifiable as you walk through the forest. If you find a pileated hole in your neighborhood, tap on the tree down below or scratch the trunk. You might have a pileated come out, or you might have a northern saw-whet owl. Their favorite nesting tree in Algonquin appears to be old sapsucker holes, often in beech trees. Maybe the adult will pop up, or later on a young one. And once you see them, you get a quick picture and you leave, and then leave them alone because you don't want to harass them. And they'll stay there for a few seconds sometimes, have a look, and then drop back down the hole again. Summer is also the time loons have finished their incubation, which is 29 days long. When the young are out, they get rides on the parent's back. And to me, when the young are hungry, they give the parent an indication by nibbling on the back. And that tells the parents to get busy and start bringing them food, very tiny fish, which they do so well. My favorite habitat, I think, in summer beyond all habitats, are the northern peatlands. Some are called bogs. Most of them are actually poor fens. But on the eastern part of Algonquin lies a rich fen that is really hard to get to, a really special sacred spot. As you walk around that, you see all the inhabitants that are typical of peatlands. Sundews, roundleaf sundew, which is carnivorous and has sticky leaf pad traps. You see the more obvious pitcher plants, well named because their leaves are like pitchers. They hold water down below. They have guiding patterns for insects, hairs that point down so the insects that come down can't walk back out. A special curve inside, so if they try to get out, they can't do it, and they slide down to the water and drown. But inside some of these pitchers, you find living animals too. I was delighted before the book was done to find this beautiful flesh fly grub. And you can see it's transparent. Here's a breathing tube, so the trachea comes up for air. The female fly lays an egg in the pitcher plant leaf, and the larva eats the drowned insects. I find that a fascinating animal. This one special fin, secret fen, I can't tell you where it is, harbors the only population of this white-fringed orchid. And Algonquin Park Naturalist found, I think it was Jim Galtz found it, I think in the 80s, I'm not sure of the exact year, but in it, there were a few of these beautiful white-fringed orchids. When I went in the last few years, the population now is at 600 flowering plants. It's magnificent. And when I was taking photographs of them, I noticed this one here. And I started thinking about a famous painting. Does this remind you at all of a famous painting by Munch? How about The Scream? Maybe not. Maybe I've been in the bush too long. Anyway, I saw that in that image. Okay, enough. This also harbors the only population in Algonquin of this really rare, hard to see, little tiny orchid, only centimeters tall, called the Southern Tway Blade. And it's still there. I went to this fen first in the 80s, and then a few times in recent years. There 2 years ago, still flowering, tiny little flowers that apparently are pollinated by very tiny mosquitoes. There's more obvious orchids there too, like a grass pink, which has a collapsing petal with a fake promise of pollen here on these modified hairs. Rose begonias are abundant, and then there's the odonates, the special odonates you find in peatlands, like crimson ringed whiteface. Beautiful male. Or the amber winged spreadwing, damselflies that don't fold their wings over their back like most do. And then you find the tiny treasures, the smallest dragonfly in North America, the size of a small bee, the second smallest in the world, the elfin skimmer. The males have this blue pruinosity, it's called on them, this blue coloration. Females look like tiny little wasps or bees. And these don't fly in the sky. These are down below your knees, drifting through the sedges on the peatland mat and through the leatherleaf. Beautiful little dragonflies. Of course, there's other flowers in summer that bloom. And here we have evening primrose with a tricolored bumblebee coming to visit it. So summer brings a great wealth of treasures. As you get to later summer, then you start seeing the later flowers like fireweed. Here being visited by a hummingbird. But of course, hummingbird's main flower in late summer is a stunning cardinal flower. And this flower is abundant along the Petawawa and Barren rivers. If you go there when the young hummingbirds are off the nest, and this is when the flower is blooming, by no coincidence, blooms in, you'll see plenty of activity with hummingbirds coming to this flower that has nectar hidden down below in the spur. And here we have the stamens rubbing the forehead. And after the pollen is gone, this part becomes female and receives pollen. Beautiful flower that's only pollinated by hummingbirds. Fantastic story. Late summer brings fruit, of course, and blueberries are abundant in the park in certain areas. Of course, black bears love these. I spent a lot of time trying to sneak up on a bear to get a good picture of a bear eating blueberries. And it's hard because bears are pretty wary. And they often will stand up, and females have bigger ears than males, by the way. This is a female bear. She looks very elegant too. Stand up and they run away, just like girls in high school did when I asked them for a date. But bears can be pretty elusive, and but not all. This one bear here was one that didn't run away, and he was a bruiser. By God, he has scars on the back of his head. He had been in fights before, and he wasn't afraid of me at all. Now, people ask me, you go to the park a lot in remote areas by yourself. Do you carry protection? And I assume they mean protection in the forms of bear spray. And I don't bring bear spray or bear bangers with me. I respect all wild animals, and I know the odds are so slim of being attacked by a bear, far greater odds being hit by a car or having an accident at home than being attacked by a bear. And so, no, I'm not. And I used to say, I'm afraid of no animal. I respect them all. Well, there has been an animal the last number of years that has terrified me, and thank God he's not found in Algonquin Park. I'll tell you, he was a very scary animal indeed. Algonquin also has a very elusive predatory animal, the wolf. That we thought back in James' days in the park and my days in the park as a young naturalist that they were small gray wolves or small timber wolves. But they're not. They're their own species, the eastern wolf, fantastic history where they were once linked to the red wolf down in the southern states. And now we have this northern remnant population left. And Algonquin has a purest number of these amazing wolves in existence. Only about 300 and their high population in spring when the pups are born. And that's over 3,000 square miles. So it's not a common animal. But boy, are they worth looking at. In summer, late summer, the pups are brought from their den sites to these open areas called rendezvous sites, spots like beaver meadows like this, where the pups are parked and the adults come back and bring them food. Here's a pup waiting for the return. When the adults come in, the pups swarm them and they bite at the corner of the mouth to have the adult cough out food, regurgitate food. I call that system, by the way, meals on heels. And here I was using a very slow shutter speed because it was not even quite daybreak yet. And you see two blurry pups coming in to get their food. The best way to encounter Algonquin wolves or the eastern wolf is by howling and have them answer back to you. And so I did record some wolves on my cell phone, close range. And I don't know how to take the sound off my cell phone, and I'm afraid to ask anybody. I'm too embarrassed. So I had to use a recording courtesy of Algonquin Park. But I wanted to let you know what they sound like. Oops. Oops, I think I pushed it right there. You know, hearing wolves is easy, but when you see a wolf, especially close up, it's just a incredible dramatic experience. It brings you back to an earlier time in our existence. And I've been so privileged over the years, pardon me, and having so many special moments with these animals. They're just incredible. Anyway, well, wolves are at the rendezvous sites. The late summer flowers are beginning, and Joe Pieweed is in full bloom with boneset. And Joe Pieweed is a butterfly magnet for everything from painted ladies to American ladies, and there's boneset here, all sorts of other things. Incredible late summer butterflies. The fruit above is ripening. The choke cherries fuel cedar waxwings, which swallow them whole, of course. And they're also very popular with eastern chipmunks, which don't really want the pulp on the outside. They often spit that out. They want the seed inside to store for winter consumption. That brings us to fall. Fall migration occurs. Broad-winged hawks leave for their southern haunts. That's a juvenile here. Fall colors in the park are spectacular. Again, bring thousands and thousands, often too many thousands, visitors now to enjoy this wild bouquet. Beautiful, beautiful place. Fall is a time for moose mating, and the females call loudly and draw bulls in. And boy, we have some magnificent bulls in Algonquin Park. And what's very important during the mating is the antler size, which fall off every year and grow anew in the spring. So antler size can be an indicator of age and health. As a young animal, as an animal's prime, and down below an older animal. And which one is turning her on? The guy in his prime. Given the choice, he'll choose a bull with big antlers. And here they are. This is the cover of my first book, Moose Country. And here he is guarding her in the 24-hour period she mates. Here she is lying down having a cigarette after mating. And the bulls are very aggressive. Then, so the years back, this guy almost got me after this picture. I learned the hard way about being too close to a bull moose in the mating season, especially when he's guarding a female. Folks, don't try it. It's not worth it unless you're a really fast runner or have somebody with you who's slower. And that'd be okay then. At the end of summer, at dawn, you start seeing the magnificent display of spider webs that are everywhere. These are sheet web spiders, told by the messy strands above that are knocked down strands, and down below is the cup in which they fall and are captured by the spider, often hiding down below. It's amazing what morning dew can reveal. Of course, you get frost also, and frost paint the landscape in a very special way, really hiding the colors on blueberry leaves, for example. The fruit of wild raisin ripens, and lots of migrating birds, both common like American robin and less common like Lincoln sparrows, will devour them. They're gone pretty quickly. Red-breasted mergansers don't nest in the park, but they pass through in late fall. Here are 3 having a bath on Lake Travers. The ducks that do nest, the hooded mergansers, stay right till freeze up. A couple of juveniles here. Beavers get very active in the fall and very day active as well, going up on land to cut down trees, some for food, some like speckled alder to put on top of the food to hold the good stuff down. They drag the branches over to their food pile near the lodge, and these get huge by late fall, and you see on top things that aren't so edible, while down below, where beavers can access the food during the winter when the top's frozen, lies the good stuff. And beavers keep trails open to the shore and to their food pile, right till the ice gets so thick they can't break it. So here are some of the trails just frozen over. And I spent a lot of hours on beaver lodges hoping to see the beaver breaking the ice, because I wondered, how do beavers break the ice? Is it with little drinks and little sandwiches? Do they break the ice that way? No, they don't. They use the back of their heads, and they come up and they break through the ice with the back of their heads, and they go along and keep that trail open, often getting ice adorning their heads in the process. But then, of course, it gets too thick eventually. The larger lakes start freezing over. Here's Lake of Two Rivers. When they're fully covered in ice, all the small ponds are frozen by then. But as the big lakes freeze, they create this dramatic beauty on the shorelines. Northern ducks stay until the ice becomes totally encompassing the lakes. That's a common goldeneye. They don't breed in the park, but they certainly pass through. And that brings us to the final season, winter. The winter of finches, often called, but sometimes pretty silent. Winter in Algonquin is a spectacle that's so striking, is stunning. In the spruce bog forest or the hardwood forest, doesn't matter. Great beauty abounds everywhere. The mammals that remain active are well equipped with warm fur. Both the underfur and the guard hairs on the outer part get thicker, and the foxes look their finest. Snowshoe hares turn white, partly for camouflage, but white hares contain hollow cells that help trap body heat, and therefore they're warmer than dark hares are. So white hares provide more warmth too. About 26% more energy is saved with snowshoe hares in winter than in summer. Ruffed grouse walk atop the snow with ease because they have snowshoes that have grown all through the fall. Little scales on the side of their toes keep them afloat. Moose have super long legs and special joints at the knees and hips that allow them to get through most snows, even up to the belly in depth. The magnificent bulls lose their antlers by early January, as these are only there to impress females and intimidate rival bulls. They're not needed for wintertime, and the excess baggage is a welcome loss to them, often by late December, sometimes early January. Barred owls are often resident year-round if small mammals stay present, while great gray owls occur sometimes as immigrants from the north, other times as local nesters. And there's been a number of nests of great gray owls, I think about 4 now, have been found in summer. So not only do they come down from the north, Algonquin's northern habitat can also entice them to stay and nest. Canada jays, of course, are year-round residents living on stored food through part of the winter. And I was very lucky a couple of years ago to find a Canada jay. At first, I thought it was yawning. Then I realized it was about to cough out the inedible parts. And what it did was amazing. It coughed out cherry pits, choke cherry pits. Choke cherries don't occur in February. So that means this bird stored them in the previous fall and then retrieved them in February and devoured them for the flesh and coughed out the seeds inside. This photo made Dan Strickland very excited because he's the expert on Canada jays and has never photographed them coughing out food. In fact, it's a pretty rare thing apparently. So you get lucky. You spend enough time out in nature, you get lucky with opportunities. The best place for finding birds in winter is down in these northern fringes of fir and spruce. There, the cones provide seeds for red squirrels, but also for things like white-winged crossbills. And sometimes red crossbills, not the big-billed ones that we have in the eastern part of Algonquin, but birds from out west that travel east some years. These are smaller billed that feed on hemlock seeds in the mountains. And when they come east, they feed on spruce seeds. Here's our larger billed males here who have bills specialized for extracting seeds from white pine cones. They all go down to the ground, by the way, to get grit to add to their gizzard to help grind up the seeds. Wolves have a tough time in winter. They got to find and kill their prey, of course, and their legs aren't as long as those of a moose. So they really struggle in deep snows. And that's why every year the wolf population, half the population dies, and many die in winter of starvation. Tough life being a wolf, especially if you get older. There's no soup kitchens out there. You just have to go on your own and die of starvation usually. But when wolves make a kill, they feel the appetites of so many other Algonquin inhabitants, from common ravens now to bald eagles that nest in the park in a number of locations. And of course, another eagle visits in winter from the farther north, golden eagles. And a number of mammals, fisher, marten, and even mink can scavenge at a carcass left by wolves. So wolves are an integral part of the winter ecology of Algonquin Park and points farther north. Finally, by the end of winter, you start getting these warmer days where hoarfrost forms near the open water of rivers like the Ox Tongue. And that means spring's around the corner that'll bring fresh buds for ruffed grouse to devour off the poplar trees. And finally, we get back to the warm season where we get our canoes out. Although sadly this year I cannot paddle. I'm going to miss canoeing so much. However, Algonquin, there's so many ways to explore Algonquin, and it doesn't matter when you go. There's always something spectacular to see at any single day you go. For example, yesterday, I drove to the park with Britta through 1 hour, driving through Algonquin. We saw a Milcom merganser that flew by in Costello Creek. Behind me, a beaver, great blue heron on West Smith Pond by the highway, fleshed off. These are all at the car window. And then I saw a beaver climb up out of the water from Costello Creek up a hill. So I followed it up. It was smelling trees. It went to about 7 different trees, smelled them, because beavers select their food by smell, and finally cut one down and dragged it back to the water, where it cut off small branches and devoured the bark. Whenever you go to Algonquin, no matter when, there's something to see. It can be at dawn, perhaps. It's like going to a grand play at dawn, no matter what habitat you go to. The sun's up, comes down, and the players start being active, just like going to a play and having the curtains drawn up or the lights come on. It could be maybe a young bull moose wandering across the airfield. By the middle of the day, flowers are up, and by late day, some flowers start opening, like evening primrose. And then when the sun goes down, a whole new set of players comes out, including the beautiful evening bluet that's only seen on the waterways after the sun goes down. This one's riding a spent male flower of a white pine tree. And then when the Milky Way illuminates the night sky, another set comes out, including the barred owl, whose calls are a famous part of Algonquin night. There are many secrets to be shared in Algonquin, shared by Algonquin with you. I'm not sure what's being said here, but pretty shocking news for this other otter. But no matter when you go there, there's so many things, so many dramatic moments that'll stay with you the rest of your life. It can be the mighty moose, or it can be the elusive wolf you just hear howling through the forest. Or even a common animal that we know so well in Algonquin Park seems special. It's because of the habitat it's in, the environment. Beavers create abstracts when swimming through reflections in their ponds. Or how about a shadow darner hovering over moving water? Or swirling water caused by whirligigs in a mass that defies logic. How do they move around like bumper cars, not hit each other? Or how about just looking at a cliff face adorned with rock tripe? Algonquin is living art. No matter where you go, you see living organisms and you see living art. Under a log, it may be a mass of ants, some ready to disperse as reproductive adults. Algonquin Park has true gold. You always hear about the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Well, there is a pot of gold, and that pot of gold is Algonquin Park. And where's that last slide? There we are. Yeah, I was told to put this on. So if you want to see more of me, I'm new to social media, but Britta's got me on Facebook and Instagram and said, be sure you show them these things. They may want to see more. Anyways, that's it. Thanks so much for watching this presentation. And I hope I haven't gone too long for you. Like I stop the share now, do I? Is that what I do?
Yep. Just stop sharing.
There we are.
Perfect. Wow, Mike. Wow. That sums up that whole presentation. That was amazing. What a privilege to have you as a speaker tonight. Those photographs, Do you teach photography at all? Because I'd love
Oh
to learn.
God, no, I don't know a damn thing about photography.
Oh,
I
wow.
know a bit about nature, not as much as guys like James Kamstra. You know, I'm really compared to so many of my friends. Oh, seriously. So, you know, I'm so in awe of people like James that have this breadth of knowledge that far exceeds will ever achieve. I've forgotten more than you learned in probably in a month, sort of thing. Anyway, but photography, no. To me, photography is simple. The secret is knowing the organisms and appreciating the organisms. That to me is the secret to nature photography. So many people now have these great cameras and they go out, they know nothing about what they're photographing and have little respect for it. And I find that repulsive.
Mm.
Should be lessons given. You buy a camera. If you're new to nature photography, don't do it until you learn about the organisms. So you learn about habitats, how to avoid stepping on things, you know, and how not to destroy the habitat around a flower or a nesting. Don't even go near nesting birds. But anyways, no, I don't teach photography. A long answer to your question. Don't get me on my little box here.
That's a really good point, actually, that you made about when you're observing nature, respecting it and making sure that you reduce your impact on it. That's a really good point.
That's the key to me to enjoying nature. We are privileged to see these organisms. And you know, compare James A back to the early days. There's so much more information on identifying things. Everything from hoverflies to, you know, dragonflies and damselflies. You know, we live in an area of information. And also the things like iNaturalist, you can post a photograph of things identified for you. I've never used that. I'm always embarrassed to have somebody else identify something for me. I've got to do it myself. I'm very silly that way. And so that's why I don't know that much, James. I learn myself. I'm a slow learner. But seriously, though, there's so much available now that wasn't available 30, 40 years ago. And it's been intimidating, isn't it? You know, if you start off in one area and try to master one area, that's a lifetime of effort. But to master all areas, forget about it. But that's the beauty of it, too, is that you always have new things to learn. You have all these puzzles to solve. Nature is the greatest inspiration. And if only more schools could get kids away from computers and out to say a beaver pond at daybreak, you know, and experience the magic, or go to a sapsucker tree and spend a whole day watching that instead of on, you know, watching whatever they watch, YouTube or video games, or what's that stupid channel for movies that everybody watches?
Netflix.
Yeah, Netflix. Yeah. Anyway, you know, I'll be totally honest. I did watch a bit of Netflix, and I've been bedbound for a few days over this, but so I did succumb. But seriously though, too many young people have not experienced the magic of nature. You know, get them out there. Let them read Two Little Savages, one of the best books ever written to inspire children to be in the woods. Anyways, I digress. I apologize.
Well, on behalf of North Durham Nature, thank you very much. James?
Yeah, do you want to have?
We're going to do questions, yeah.
For sure.
Why don't we do some questions first?
I got to stop by 11 o'clock though, James. That's my witching hour.
If you have any questions, just type them in the chat and I'll read them out to Mike.
No, it's funny with the way you're doing that is that I try to shorten the talk. You know, I'm famous for having too many images and speaking too long. So I'm trying to shorten it, but I kept adding images today. The ones from yesterday, just showing how every moment in Algonquin, you know, produces magic. I had to include those things. So anyway, I'm not sure how long my talk was, but I'm sure it was a little bit too long. Well, maybe not too bad.
All right, we have a question from Carrie. Have you ever seen Aurora Borealis in Algonquin Park?
Certainly have. And the nice part about Algonquin is that it's got none of the light interference that we have in most areas near major cities. And it's got beautiful, clear skies. And I've been not fortunate because the aurora often is a peak about 2 in the morning or so, 2 to 3 in the morning. And those enthusiasts that go out there and photograph spectacular northern lights, I tend to be sleeping pretty soundly at that time. And so I've got some photographs, but nothing really spectacular yet. So that's one challenge that awaits me, to get a really good aurora borealis. But yes, there are times when it is spectacular up here because of the dark skies that Algonquin's famous for.
Okay. Do you use a digital camera or film?
Well, I used to use film till it came up. I was a diehard staying with film, and finally got into digital. And I must say it's got great advantages. Especially I'm actually really advanced now. I got mirrorless cameras. And one thing I like about the mirrorless camera, it's got a silent mode that you can go into. And also, of course, the range of ISOs. But funny, I'm of the old school where I used film. I used to shot like 25 ISO Kodachrome, and my high speed was 50 ISO Fujichrome at Velvia. And to go to a camera that goes to 32,000 ISO, you know, I don't go past 1,000 usually. I'm scared to go past 1,000. And generally I shoot about 800 or so. So I have not used the cameras to their full advantage. In fact, I only shoot manual. I have these stupid cameras worth thousands of dollars. I only put them on manual. That's all I can do. And so I adjust the shutter and the aperture quickly. Although now I can't do that because of my bum hand. So I've got to try one-handed photography. It's not easy. I can't, but I'm trying hard. And as you saw, I'm still getting photographs. Got the beaver yesterday and a couple of flight shots. So yeah, I'm doing okay.
Okay, next question. Just so you know, in between all these questions, there are a lot of compliments towards your presentation. It was well enjoyed by everybody.
I hope some of these compliments result in new members for you. And your $10 bargain, folks, that's unbelievable. You know, buy for your friends. Great Christmas gifts. But I guess it's too far away. What's next? Father's Day, Mother's Day?
Mother's Day?
Buy a whole bunch of those. $10. That's too much of a bargain. You guys are very generous. I hope lots of members out of this.
Oh, thank you. I hope so too. What is the little button eyeweed in our shallow bay that Hagen's bluet land on? It is just above the water.
The little which?
It's a little button eyeweed in our shallow bay that Hagen's.
Hagen's blue. That's a tiny little damselfly.
They land on. It is just above the water. So it wants to know the little button eyeweed that the bluet lands on.
James, do you have any idea what this is? I
don't know. I'd have to see a photo, I think.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
I can't visualize this sort of thing, so
maybe it's a pipewort or something.
Well, it could be pipewort because is a person still able to answer because if it's whitish on top?
Sandy, if you want to turn your mic on and
that'd be an excellent idea, pipewort.
Yeah, I think that's pipewort, Mike.
No leaves, a little button on top, whitish button.
Sandy, if you want to turn your mic on and just maybe explain a little bit more.
Yes, it is white on top.
Okay, and really tiny and little stalk.
Yes.
Which, by the way, that stalk can go down a long way to the bottom. They can produce really long stalks. But yeah, pipewort, James, absolutely right. I vote for that one too, for sure.
So pipewort, W-O-R-T?
W-O-R-T.
Awesome. I could never get that identified. That's fantastic. Thank you.
And it's believed to be insect pollinated, but no one knows by what. So there's a good plant to look at closely. It's so tiny, the flowers. What the heck is pollinating it?
And I've seen little tiny, almost like midges on it when I've been floating out in the canoe.
Yeah.
On the top of the little white button.
Well, maybe that's what's doing it.
I don't know. I just wondered if the bluets had something to do with it because they're always landing on top and resting. But I don't know. That's why I'm asking you.
Well, it's possible. It's possible. And you know, there are other bluets that look like Hagen's as well. But if you look at the genitalia on the males, then you got Hagen's for sure. But there are a number of bluets that look similar. And if there's a bit of current around pipewort, sometimes it could be another species of damselfly you're seeing there, as well as Hagen's maybe.
Okay. Yeah. I will look that up. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sandy, for your question. Okay, Patricia, do you have any tips for how to get away from the crowds to see nature without others interfering? Example, scarring wildlife. I know the backcountry areas, but if I only have a weekend, are there tips for the front country?
Yes, yeah. Highway 60, you mean Algonquin Park, I assume. Is that what the question is, centered on Algonquin Park? If it is, Highway 60 is the busiest part through highway. But there are other access points too that are much quieter. For example, Brent Road goes into Cedar Lake. That's a beautiful area. It's very quiet. But down in the southeastern part, the Basin Depot Road is one that has so many beaver ponds, and it has wolves and everything else there, and so few people. A lot of my meetings with wildlife has been on the Basin Depot Road. It's not a through road, it's a gravel road, and hence its lack of use. The Barron Canyon Road that goes to Lake Travers and Acre on the side is also less traveled too. And those are good spots to visit where you're not in those huge crowds that often are found at Highway 60. And by the way, I don't want to plug it, but Britta said be sure to mention it. I have a book called The Explorer's Guide to Algonquin Park. It just came out last month in the 4th edition. And there are chapters on where to see things in different parts of Algonquin, as well as general overviews of things like butterflies and dragonflies and moose and wolves and that sort of thing. So if you're new to Algonquin Park, it might be a useful book to have a look at least, you know. And yeah, so I don't like plugging things, but I was told to do this. And I always do what I'm told. So I'll mention The Explorer's Guide to
Sorry.
Oh,
Go ahead, James.
those insect shots, like the really close-ups of the flies, what sort of are you using just a macro there, or are you doing?
Yeah, for the biting flies, which I'm really, I took great pains in getting those photographs, James. They're tough, especially a stable fly biting you. But yeah, I have a 180 mac. I use Canon. I have a 180 macro lens and put it on 1.4 times teleconverter, and that allows me. I can still hold my arm close enough to the lens on a tripod. I used to be able to before this to get a picture. But then for the springtails, the columbella, that's a very special macro lens. I think it's 65 millimeter with macro flash units. It gives 5 times life size. And then with digital, of course, with a high resolution camera, you can crop in a bit to get the right size. So, but for the average thing for all the butterflies and for the biting insects, I use the 180 macro. I love that lens. It's one of Canon's best lenses.
Okay. From Gary, is the eastern wolf the only wolf there? And are there coyotes?
Good question. There have been records of coyotes in the park, and gray wolves also done through DNA analysis. The Wolf Research Program, now run by Brent Patterson, the MNR biologist, he's done DNA on lots of animals. And while many are fairly pure eastern wolf, he has had a rare coyote in the park and a rare gray wolf as well. So yes, those animals are also known, but rarely. And people often misconstrue what these wolves are and call them coy wolves, which is a stupid term, I think, produced by a film producer who didn't know much about coyotes and wolves. In the past, historically, when coyotes first came into Ontario back in the early 1900s, I think 1901, they first came in on 3 different parts of Ontario. They did meet the odd eastern wolf. Female coyotes disperse farther than male coyotes do. So the first ones coming to Ontario probably female coyotes, and they probably met the odd single male eastern wolf. And because they're close relatives, they were formerly separated by habitat, where eastern wolves were forested animals, while coyotes were prairie animals, and they came east from the forest, were destroyed, and the wolves eliminated. There was a chance for hybridization, and some events occurred. But then with back crossing, with more and more coyotes coming in, you have fairly pure eastern coyotes in Ontario, and you've got eastern wolves in Algonquin Park. And there are some cases where there's still probably hybridization, but to call them coy wolves is wrong. That means they're half wolf, half coyote, and those animals are rare and few and far between at the contact zones maybe. But generally, eastern wolves would probably kill coyotes, especially if a pack encountered a coyote. And so they don't integrate as many people mistakenly think they do.
That's interesting.
And by the way, historically, gray wolves are probably in Algonquin Park. Before the eastern forests were destroyed and wolves eliminated from the southern part of the range, gray wolves, and deer moved north, and eastern wolves, back then probably red wolves, moved north as well. And so the dynamics have changed over the years, with gray wolves being pushed back farther north and eastern wolves moving farther north. And that's the situation today.
Wow, that's really interesting. Those, when you played the call, that was like the calls of the wolves. That was really neat. It reminded me, I went to the wolf howl at Algonquin Park, and they actually did respond to the park naturalists, and it was just amazing to hear them. And they sounded so close.
Yeah. You know what's amazing now? Those famous wolf howls that were world famous have stopped on Highway 60. They don't have it anymore. And the main reason is a couple of reasons, but it boils down to they have to have police involved now to stop traffic both ways. It costs them thousands of dollars, and they got to pay before the event, and the money's not refundable. And often the wolf howl doesn't happen if they don't find wolves on Highway 60. So those howls are pretty well gone. But every year I have 2 howls I do myself, one for Bonnechere Park. It's in third weekend of August, and we go into the basin area, and we've had wolves answer back on 80% of all the howls with no scouting, just good spots that look good, and very intimate experiences. And we only have between 100 and 200 people on those howls versus 2,000 on Highway 60 or more. So really intimate. And the other howls at Acray at Grand Lake and up the Barron Canyon Road. And I've done those howls. I did the Bonnechere howl for, I think we're 27 years now or something.
Wow.
And the Acray howl for 12 or 13 years. And success rate at Acray is also about 80% of the time. So, you know, these are, and we only have maybe 80 to 100 people on the Acray howl. So if you want to go on a public wolf howl, you'll find the Highway 60 probably won't have them anymore. But if you want to go on a more intimate howl, you can go to Bonnechere Park and to Acray and look on their website, see when they're being held. Of course, with COVID, we did a virtual howl last year. And guess what? I went to both the Basin Depot Road with Hugo Kitching, a phenomenal cinematographer, and Barron Canyon Road to simulate the Algonquin howl at Acray and the Basin Depot howl for the Bonnechere. And we had wolves answer back at both spots.
Wow.
So we were successful last year. Our string continues with success on the howls, either real or virtual.
Wow, that's amazing. So do you do the howl yourself? Do you call it?
I do the howl myself, yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. Okay, there's a question about the camera, but I think you already answered that. Just about the lens that you use.
I got a number of lenses, and some.
And what camera? What's the name of the camera you use?
Well, now I use a new Canon. It's called the R5, and I have an R6. I always want a backup camera when I'm really serious about photography or getting nature, captured. So I have a 2. I've never used the R6, I don't think, but the R5 is all right. Yeah.
Another compliment. Oh, and the question about if it's recorded. Yes, this has been recorded, and we have a YouTube channel. North Durham Nature has a YouTube channel, and we'll post the recording on the YouTube channel. It doesn't get posted right away because I'm the one who trims the beginning and the end of it. So it just has the intro and the presentation and some questions. So, and I'm still learning with all this technology, but I do get it done and I do post it. So I will email it to all those that pre-registered, and you can find a link to it on our website. Okay. Oh, lots of people saying they will for sure join North Durham Nature. That's awesome.
Excellent. Good.
Give me a second. For me, we would like to visit the Non-Quan Reserve sometimes, but now there is a big no trespassing sign. Okay, so that no trespassing sign has been put up because of the pandemic. There was an increased number of users who were not respecting and using the property properly. And so unfortunately, we had to put that up. Also, the staff are working from home. We're doing virtual teaching of the students, or we're going to their schoolyards when their schools are open and working with them that way. So we're not there to sort of monitor things. So that's another reason the sign went up. And the third reason is because we're not maintaining the trails. And so it's a bit of a liability issue because there's trees that have fallen and we haven't had them taken down. So that's why the sign is up there. It's not like there's nobody policing it, but that's why the sign is up there. And there's lots of people I've seen who have been using the property respectfully. So I hope that answers your question. But the sign will come down at the end of the pandemic when we're back to the regular way of doing things. How is logging affecting wildlife, Mike?
Well, it's funny. Yeah, there've been studies done on various things, and it has adverse effects. I believe it's been found maybe on some of the amphibians, salamanders, but for other animals, it's been a benefit. And the large ungulates, moose and deer, have no doubt benefited from logging because not just after an area is cut, there's new growth coming up that they browse, but also on the logging roads that are network all through the park. Landings where logs are being piled up. These open areas with the edges have provided food for ungulates, and therefore, because these are the main prey of beavers, of eastern wolves, in some ways logging has benefited eastern wolves indirectly. And so, a lot of groups want logging out of the park. However, when Algonquin was formed in 1893, logging was part of its mandate. And part of the reason the park was formed is to provide forest, forest to use through logging. And, it'd be nice, I think, to have logging removed because then you wouldn't have disturbance in the forest. But a small percent is logged every year. I think it's 3% of the park is under logging lease, which moves around. Clear cutting is done in only extreme conditions where it's almost all selective logging. So the forest is left fairly intact. In terms of logging's effect on the natural history of the park, the effect of it is much less than clear cutting in the boreal forest, which is destroying the boreal forest. So it is a matter of I suppose, of ethics, and not ethics really, but what people perceive a park should be. Algonquin is a multi-use park and logging is part of it. I think overall the logging that's done is fairly well controlled. And if you enjoy hearing wolves and seeing moose and deer and even beaver, because beaver like poplar that doesn't grow in shady conditions, I think logging is enhancing their survival in the park. And so it's a mixed thing. Mixed feeling really about logging, and it's not all bad. That's definitely for sure.
Okay, thank you. From Kane, have you ever seen fishers there?
Oh yeah. And if you ever see a fisher, and there certainly are more difficult, you see one, often they run away. Try squeaking. In fact, that's the best way to see them. Squeaking is, well, my right hand is normally done, but I can't use my right hand, so. Which imitates an injured animal, and they really respond to that. And often I've seen a fisher run off and come back to the squeaking. For a quick few of them, they're gone. But one of my claims to fame that I am very proud of for myself, that is that on the Basin Depot Road one morning at daybreak, I was squeaking, and a barred owl flew in from the right and landed beside me. I heard leaves rustling on my left, and a fisher came out. So I had a fisher on one side and a barred owl on the other side. Neither stayed very long, but that was all due to the power of squeaking. And that's the best way of encountering many of the more elusive predatory birds and predatory mammals, because they all want an easy meal. And they come in and they leave almost right away. So it's not like you're disturbing them and keeping them from finding a meal on their own. And once I squeaked a barred owl in, and then a red-tailed hawk attacked it. Didn't get it, which was good. I would have felt bad, felt guilty if I had the hawk get a meal courtesy of me. But generally the meetings are fleeting, and it is a fantastic way. So you can just kiss your fingers, And again, I'm right-handed, so this is very awkward for me, but not bad. And the other call for small birds is pishing, which all naturalists, all birders know, which agitates the birds into believing there's a predatory bird like an owl there, that's sedentary, and they come in to mob it. So those are little tools that are tricks of the trade that every naturalist carries with them whenever they go in the woods.
Thank you. Interesting from John. Interesting discussion on wolves. What would we have in the Uxbridge area? Wolves or coyotes? They appear to be in packs.
Yeah, coyotes. And the packs are family groups that you're seeing together. In the Uxbridge area, I could say, I think, with pretty good confidence that these are coyotes.
Could you use some volunteers at the Algonquin Reserve?
No, I couldn't, but maybe you could.
Karen, I will answer that question to you personally. I'll send you an email, okay? Gary Walker, where would you go to see the largest old growth trees?
Well, what's interesting is there used to be like 2 locations of the park: the Crow River with these giant white pines towering above the maples, or Dividing Lake. But then about, I say recent history, probably 20 years ago, they found big pines on Highway 60, and they put a trail called the Big Pines Trail. So right on Highway 60 across the Rock Lake turnoff, you can walk in a trail and see old growth white pines there. What's funny is many people call old growth trees virgin trees, and that's ridiculous. These trees have had sex for decades and decades. They're not, seriously. So why call them virgin trees? A much better term is old growth, I think, for these big trees.
Okay. I think.
Okay, maybe that's
it.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yep, that's the last question.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Mike, I would, on behalf of North Durham Nature, I really appreciate you giving that fantastic presentation. And I know you think I'm a great naturalist, but I certainly don't think I have anything on you. And you taught me a few things today. Like I kind of wondered about these common mergansers, why you never see a male this summer. And I didn't know they all disappeared up to Hudson Bay. And then
yeah.
I know about snow fleas, but I didn't know about these other snow scorpion flies, and then about the water lily sex changes. Like there was so much to learn from your presentation and just your eye. And I just wonder about how much time, like getting those photographs, how much time are you out there, like chasing, like you were mentioning the beavers where you're sitting at the lodge for hours waiting to come up. And I guess that's what it takes. And that's why so few people get the kind of photographs that you get. So not only did you have phenomenal photographs, you had this presentation, you kind of wrapped it all together in the seasons. It was just phenomenal. And there were so many of the comments that Kara said, so many of the comments that, I think this is certainly one of our most memorable presentations.
Oh, thank you very much.
So much for that. That was a tremendous presentation.
Thanks so much, James. Cut from you especially. That means so much. Thank you.